Hello and welcome back to our reading of the Yamas and Niyamas. Today we have Satya. I love this chapter and the stories that Deborah Adele offers for us to understand Satya, or truthfulness. Satya begins on page 42 if you're following along in your own book. Satya, is my yes coming from a dark corner or from the light in my heart? Satya, truthfulness. Perhaps you have read The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This delightful series has certainly been a favorite in my family over the years. In a passage from the first book of the series, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, 4 children are about to be introduced to the mighty King Aslan by Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. Mr. Beaver lets them know that Aslan can right wrongs, banish sorrows, drive out winter, and bring spring to the land. When asked if Aslan is a man, Mr. Beaver sternly declares to the children that Aslan is definitely not a man. He is the king of beasts, and anyone who approaches him should go with their knees knocking. The children are afraid that Aslan isn't safe, and their fears are confirmed by Mr. Beaver, but he also assures them that although the king of beasts isn't safe, he is good. Like Aslan, the Lion King, the jewel of Satya, or truthfulness, isn't safe, but it is good. Truth has the power to right wrongs and end sorrows. It is fierce in its demands and magnanimous in its offerings. It invites us to places we rarely frequent and where we seldom know what the outcome will be. If we don't approach truth with our knees knocking, we haven't really understood the profoundness of this guideline. We may think that truth means simply not fibbing to our mom when she asks if we ate the forbidden cookie, but truth demands integrity to life and to our own self that is more than not telling a simple lie. When we are real rather than nice, when we choose self-expression over self-indulgence, when we choose growth over the need to belong, and when we choose fluidity over rigidity, we begin to understand the deeper dynamics of truthfulness, and we begin to taste the freedom and goodness of this jewel. Be real rather than nice. Carl Jung writes, "A lie would make no sense unless the truth was felt to be dangerous." Why do we lie? Are we afraid to hurt someone's feelings, or afraid if we told the truth we would not be liked or admired anymore? I have a friend who says, "I pick the right-sized box, put myself in it, wrap it with pretty paper in a bow, and then present myself to the other person." I have another friend who states, "I always show up differently with different people. My biggest fear is that everyone I know will be in the same room at the same time and I won't know who to be." And then there is the whole topic of nice. I once heard Rogiyaj Achala say that you have to watch out for nice people. Being a nice person myself, I was at first offended and then confused. So I took this statement to heart and began pondering its truth. I began to see the distortion that sits between nice and real. Nice is an illusion, a cloak hiding lies. It is an imposed image of what one thinks they should be. It is a packaging of self in a presentable box, imposed by an outer authority. People who are nice hold truth inside until they reach a breaking point, and then they become dangerously inappropriate. I know because I used to be such a person. Real comes from the center of our unique essence and speaks to the moment from that center. Real has a boldness to it, an essence, a spontaneity. Real asks us to forgive from a place where Real asks us to live from a place where there is nothing to defend and nothing to manage. It is a contact with the moment that is not superimposed or prepackaged. Real is something we may not always like in another, but we come to know there will be no surprises. Real, though not always pleasant, is trustworthy. When I met my husband, I mistook him for a gay man. As a result, I didn't display myself as I normally would have if I had thought there might be a chance for romance. I know now that the deepness we have in our relationship has been built from the foundation of that first experience of showing him the real, authentic me, and he in turn has given me the same gift of realness. What is driving you to distort yourself or silence yourself or say yes when you mean no? Or as Carl Jung would ask us, what is so dangerous in the moment about the truth that you are choosing to lie? These are questions that merit our pondering. Self-expression versus self-indulgence. When we habitually silence and distort ourselves, we begin to lose our lust for life and look towards other things to fulfill us. We forget that we are here on this earth to self-express in a way no one else has ever could. We can feel this urge within us wanting to bubble up and say to the world, I'm here. Our self-expression can find its way into the world in many forms. But when the process of our self-expression is imposed on for whatever reason, we can easily turn towards self-indulgence. Most often, this imposition comes in the form of shoulds or should-nots, either from our own self-messages or from others' messages to us. The result is always a misdirection of energy. There's a settling for less than we had hoped for, a kind of resolution to things as they are. Often we find ourselves hiding by overeating or overworking, rather than doing what we really want to do. Living the life that cries to be lived from the depth of our being frees up a lot of energy and vitality. The juices flow. Everyone around us benefits from the aliveness that we feel. On the other hand, suppressing that life, for whatever reason, takes a lot of our life energy just in the managing of the pretending. Arthur Samuel Joseph, nationally known voice teacher, and author of the book Vocal Power, Harnessing the Power Within, gives his first-time students an interesting assignment. He tells them to go home and record themselves reciting a poem and then singing a song. Then he tells them to take off all their clothes and repeat the exercise. Joseph says that when the student returns for their next lesson and presents their homework, Joseph can tell which recording was done naked because the naked version is much more vibrant. In all the ways we package ourselves and protect ourselves, or when we choose the safety of belonging over the inner need to grow, we also dull ourselves. The need to belong versus the need to grow. In the family constellation work of Bert Hellinger, therapeutic work dealing with family systems, a unique slant on guilt and innocence is expressed. Hellinger says that as human beings, we have both a need to belong to groups and a need to expand and grow. Hellinger says that as long as we stay within the approval of the group, we experience the innocence of belonging. However, when we begin to grow in directions beyond the group, we experience guilt in regards to the group. The truth of our freedom carries the price of guilt. I experienced this in my own life when I embraced feminism. At that time, feminism was a refuge for me that gave voice to many of the experiences of my life. It just made sense to me that women were as important as men and that there should be equality between the sexes. My mother was mortified because feminism went against everything she believed in. I couldn't have done anything more evil in her sight. I found myself feeling guilty in relationship to her and the love I felt for her. And yet I know that for the first time in my life, I was following a deep longing in my soul. Although our love for each other remained strong and intact, my choice around feminism remained a painful topic for both my mother and me. The groups we belong to are many. our country, our culture, our gender, our class, our age group, our race, our religion, our family of origin, our community, our workplace, and the various organizations that we are members of. All of these groups have rules and belief systems, some written, some silently understood, that must be followed for us to be part of the group. These rules and belief systems are necessary. They are what shape the group and give the group its identity. As long as these rules don't conflict with our inner longing to grow more and more into our full self, there is no problem. However, when a conflict arises between the need to belong and the need to grow, we have to make a choice. We must either sacrifice a part of ourselves to maintain our belonging, or we must risk the approval and support of the group by growing. Think of the protester whose conscience opposes a war her country is engaged in. Following her realness, will she take a stance, even if it means going to jail? Or think of the man who finds himself in a dead-end job that holds no interest or life for him, and yet he has a family to support with kids ready for college. Will he make the switch to a job that excites him but pays a significantly lower salary? Or the young mother who is longing to go back to school but is deeply entrenched in a family and community that demands that mothers stay home and care for their small children? Will she choose the realness of her longing, trusting she can care for her children even more deeply from a place of satisfaction in the excitement of her own life? In all of these situations, there is no wrong or right choice. Rather, these situations point out why listening to and acting on our inner voice to change and grow, to move on, to speak truth to ourselves and then act on it can be so difficult at times. If we pursued any of these stories in more depth, we would see that other factors can easily be pulled in as additional reasons to remain in the status quo, stacking the deck even more in favor of staying the same. I often hear people say, "I just don't know what to do." I think more often than not, we do know what to do. The cost of our realness just seems too high at the time. Truth rarely seems to ask the easier choice for us. In the moment-to-moment details of our daily living, truth asks us to pay attention and to act correctly for the first time. Do it right the first time. Yogi Raj Achala makes the statement that it is worth the effort to do the task right the first time, because cleanup takes so much time. Think about this for a moment. How much time do you spend having to find someone you were a little harsh with and apologize? Or go back and tell someone you can't really do what you said you would do? Or maybe you spend your time and energy trying to avoid that person because of your own embarrassment. Can you imagine speaking and acting so correctly that you never have to go back and apologize or make a new agreement? Or how much time do you spend avoiding things you dislike, like writing your will or facing your finances? These are all acts of cheating truth that result in messes we eventually have to clean up. And what about those lies you tell yourself? I continuously find myself in trouble because I lie to myself about time. I make promises to myself and others that don't allow for the reality of interruptions, rest, or play. Then I either have to backtrack on my promises or find myself out of balance, keeping up with too many commitments I have made because my dishonesty with myself. I also lie to myself when I set lofty goals that are more wishful thinking than anything the reality of my days can incorporate. And then I have to clean up the mess I have made with myself. Not only that, but I have become once again a person who cannot trust herself. Can you trust yourself? Can you risk telling yourself the truth? Can you keep the promises that you make to yourself and to others? We must be willing to take the risk to tell ourselves the truth and grow ourselves into someone who can trust themselves. We will then be able to easily bear others' trust in us. Being truthful with ourselves makes us trustworthy and frees up all the time we normally spend in guilt and regret from our dishonesty. Truth saves us from having to clean up, and as a bonus, we get to learn something in the process. Doing it right the first time does not always look the same way. Truth is a dance where the rules and certainties change with the circumstances. This fluidity is what makes truth so interesting. Truth is fluid. Because of its marriage to nonviolence, truth has a fluidity about it. In one situation, truth shows up boldly and courageously as we do a tough intervention on a loved one who is faltering under alcoholism. In another situation, truth shows up in a most gentle way, as when we heap praise upon a young child's diligent artwork. Both of these examples show the different flavor that the practice of truth takes when it is partnered with the love of nonviolence. The compassion of nonviolence keeps truthfulness from being a personal weapon. It asks us to think twice before we walk around mowing people down with our truth, and then wonder where everyone went. The fluidity of truth also requires that we clean our lens and periodically get new glasses with which to observe the world. Our seeing is limited by all the groups that shape us, as well as by our experience. What we believe, whether we are aware of that belief or not, informs everything we do and every choice we make. To be a bold person of truth is to constantly look for what we are not seeking and to expose ourselves to different views than the ones we hold sacred. As Yogi Raja Chalam reminds us, what are you not seeing because you are seeing what you are seeing? Carl Jung understood the fluidity of truth when he made the statement that what is true at one time for us, at some point, no longer serves us and eventually becomes a lie. He understood that truth changes over time. What was true when we were 2 years old is no longer true or even relevant when we are 17. In Modern Man in Search of Soul, Jung writes, thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with the false presumption that our truths and ideals will serve us as hitherto. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will be at evening have become a lie. The guideline of truthfulness asks us to update our beliefs and values and views in order to stay current with ourselves and our surroundings. In India, the fluidity of truth was understood in the practice of what was called the ashramic stages. Life was divided into 4 equal parts, or times in life, in which a certain aspect of living was honored and pursued. In the first period of life, it was time to grow up and, with the support of your parents, learn a skill in which you showed interest and ability. In the second period of life, it was time to use this skill for the good of the community and to receive money in return so you could live and raise a family. In the third period of life, it was time to leave worldly possessions and tasks in pursuit of inner wisdom. And in the last phase of life, it was time to return to the community, guiding and supporting the community with the inner wisdom that had been attained. Today's times may feel more complicated to us, but there is something to learn from these ashramic stages. We can use these stages to ask ourselves if we are engaged in the truthful pursuit that is right for this time of our lives, and to assess if we have done something significant to mark these rites of passage. Ritual helps us to end to begin again, without carrying the dead weight of what we have left behind. My oldest granddaughter just marked a turning point when she, along with her whole senior class, met the evening before the beginning of their senior year to write their names in chalk on the high school parking lot. It was a significant event that marked the beginning and ending of a phase of life. Truth has weight. Although truth prefers fluidity to rigidity, it also has real substance to it. There is a thickness or a weight to a person who practices truthfulness. I remember hugging my business partner Anne one day and telling her that she was thick. She looked a little taken aback until I explained that I could feel the depth of her integrity and her boldness to make contact with life however it comes to her. I remember literally being able to feel this thickness to her. I could feel her realness. Like Anne, a person of substance is willing to stay present in life no matter what its initial unpleasantness. They know that staying present with the truth of the moment will add more depth to their lives and grow them up to be a creative and responsible, versus becoming a person who walks around with a subtle "rescue me" sign. When we run from life, try to manage life, or leave our energy scattered here and there, we feel differently than when our whole self shows up with our thoughts, words, and actions, congruent and unified. When we are centered in the moment, we can fully meet the ordinariness of life as well as the challenges of life. Dishes are met with the same contact as our arguments, as our hugs. There is no need to tame ourselves or hide ourselves. All of us shows up to the moment, ready to meet in the truth and integrity, ready to make full contact. Meeting the moment full on is like playing a contact sport. We aren't afraid to play the game with everything we have, or to get knocked around a little in the process. It's all part of the fun. There's a profound courage to this kind of willingness to be raw with reality as it is, rather than to run from it or construct a barrier to soften it. When I traveled to Central America in 1988 with the Augsburg College Center for Global Education, I saw firsthand this kind of willingness to be raw with reality, no matter how horrible. At that time, El Salvador was a dangerous place to travel, as untold thousands were being picked up, tortured, and disposed of in a state park by the El Salvadoran militia. I sat with mothers of the disappeared whose photos showed pictures of their dead loved ones, displaying myriad signs of torture, and yet I witnessed courage, love, joy, and community like I have never come close to experiencing since. There was something in the fierceness of the way the people met the truth of their lives and risked for the sake of justice. In a place and time of the greatest of personal horrors, they were able to contact life in its fullness. It was a profound time for me. I was shocked when I returned to the States from my time in Central America. Everything felt protected and stale to me. It was as if a culture has constructed barriers to tame reality. It was as if we as a culture aren't able to risk telling ourselves the truth. Not long ago, I witnessed the pathos of a situation in which a pit bull killed a small dog. A few days later, my son was in a pet store and overheard the manager tell one of the new clerks that in order to sell the pit bull puppy they had in the store, the clerk was to tell customers that the puppy was an American Terrier. This effort to construct barriers to hide truth seems to me like a contagious disease in our country. What are we so afraid of? The power of truth. One of the things that amazed me when I first read Gandhi's autobiography was his statement about his life being an experiment with truth. I would have expected him to say an experiment in nonviolence, but he didn't. He said truth. To me, this statement captures the power that living with truth has. A poor colonized country united in nonviolence, gaining its freedom. A dominant country brought to its knees. This was arguably the greatest nonviolent revolution in history, and all because of one man's experiment with truth. It makes me wonder what my life might look like if I were willing to contact truthfulness in every moment. That is the end of the reading for Satya. Following each chapter are questions for exploration. You're welcome to take a screenshot. If you're wanting to follow your journaling, or take a few minutes to dig a little deeper into Satya. Next time we will dive into asteya, non-stealing. Please take care of yourselves, take care of those you love, and until next time, namaste.